So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all of our panel members and all of those who've come today. The topic of our seminar this morning is on infrastructure, well-being, and conflict prevention. And I'm very happy to introduce the various members of our panel. This is a interesting and new topic, and I had the great pleasure of reading some of Hoda's book, the introduction, which I think some of you also have the link to and the reference to. So we'll be hearing from Dr. Hoda Mahmoudi first, and I'll introduce each of the speakers at this point, and each will speak in turn. And then there'll be a period for question and answer at the very end of all the presentations. So Professor Hoda Mahmoudi, who's joining us, and she's online on the Zoom link, is the editor of a recent volume on infrastructure, well-being, and the measurement of happiness. She's also the Bahá'í Chair for World Peace at the University of Maryland, which is an endowed academic program that advances interdisciplinary examination and discourse on global peace. And before that, prior to that, she was Dean of College of Arts and Sciences at Northeastern Illinois University, where she was also a faculty member in the Department of Sociology. Also in front here is Louisa Tsang. She has joined recently the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank a couple years ago, 3 years ago, from Hong Kong originally. And so this Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank is the second largest multilateral development institution. And she arrived in 2021, November, to help establish their ombuds office in the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. And she offers independent, impartial, informal, confidential assistance to the employees in resolving conflicts and workplace issues inside of the bank, and handles various claims and allegations and issues that might arise inside the bank. And she also advises the senior management on strategies to enhance the workplace environment. So we'll be hearing from her as well today. Also in the front is Dr. David Palmer. He's a professor of anthropology in the Department of Sociology and the Institute for Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Hong Kong here. He had his BA at McGill and PhD at EPHE in Paris, and was a postdoc fellow at the LSE in London. He currently directs a series of major collaborative projects funded by the RGC on the socio-cultural dimensions of the Belt and Road Initiative, and he also leads a team investigating social impacts of Chinese infrastructure projects overseas. And he's developing approaches for stakeholder engagement and social risk management adapted for Chinese and local realities. So most welcome to all of our panelists. And also I want to introduce our class. This is a class, and many of us are here from that class. Some may also are visiting from other. Hello, welcome. So the class is called Preventative Law, and this is a course hosted by the law school. And so many of our colleagues here are working in various areas of dispute resolution, and they are engaging in research on internal systems that have been established within various types of organizations to see how they can help prevent and mitigate conflict. So raise your hand if you're in the class. We acknowledge you as well. So thank you very much. And then we have some guests. I see Sarah from Macau, University of Macau in the law faculty, and Sue Cham, who led many important organizations in Hong Kong, their establishment in the dispute resolution field. So I know you were involved in FDRC and multiple organizations, the mediation office. So very happy to have all of you here. Okay, so maybe what we'll do is turn it over to Hoda now. And I'm going to give the screen to you, and I'll make your screen larger here.
Thank you, Shahla, very much. I really appreciate the invitation. It's a pleasure to be able to participate in this important panel. I'm coming to you from Washington, D.C., so I wish I could have been there in person. In 2023, the Bahá'í Chair, after it held a conference on an interdisciplinary approach to infrastructure, it published a book, an edited volume called Infrastructure, Wellbeing, and the Measurement of Happiness. And Shahla, I can't change the slides. If you could, let me see. Oh, there we go. Okay. Here's the cover of the book, in case you haven't seen it. But it's an interdisciplinary approach to the topic. So we have scholars and practitioners from the various fields and various perspectives who have contributed chapters to this very rich volume. And so for the purpose of time, I'm going to go fairly quick through these slides. So the first is, what does infrastructure mean? Well, a high-quality infrastructure is characterized by being reliable, efficient, sustainable, and accessible, serving as the foundation of a thriving society and economy. And it should encompass both the physical structures, which is the hard infrastructure, as well as the social systems, which is soft. And really, both are essential for successful infrastructure and human well-being. The ideal infrastructure focuses on human development, well-being, and happiness, all of which there are various measurements that scholars have developed over the years to be able to have some metrics on these matters. Another factor is a focus, such a focus, and that was looking at human development, well-being, and happiness. That focus states that there is an essential dignity in every human being that must be taken into consideration when we look at different infrastructure projects. And that it should also lead to broader recognition of human rights and human justice. So a good infrastructure is to reach for a collective prosperity and to leave a physical representation of that effort. A broad infrastructure calls on people to develop skills towards the advancement of a collective societal goal. And a well-constructed infrastructure pays attention to the needs and well-being of all citizens, regardless of socioeconomic status or other characteristics. Carefully planned infrastructure takes into consideration the essential necessities of all citizens in offering access to services. And a well-designed infrastructure creates an environment for citizens to build wholesome neighborhoods, beautiful communities that reduce stress and enhance health. Finally, in every instance, the ethics of infrastructure takes into consideration the special needs of all people, whether they are poor or rich, young or old, healthy or sick. So I think it's really important to distinguish between material infrastructure and non-material infrastructure. In material infrastructure, we rely on such things as roads, bridges, water, housing, accessibility to technology or connectivity, but it should eventually be connected to the immaterial infrastructures that we all rely on, which really has to do with human relational matters such as cooperation, shared values, common destinies, extremely important. And we should eventually come to the realization that the fate of our entire planet's infrastructure really reflects our common condition and our shared future. The relationship between physical and natural environment and the human heart is something that I think we pay far too little attention to. The premise being that a beautiful environment can bring about a positive change in the hearts of people, which in turn brings about a positive change in the physical environment. I think this organic relationship between humans, their environment, how they beautify, how they improve that environment, and how that in turn helps to make life more happy, more meaningful. I think this is a very important factor that one should pay attention to when looking at infrastructure. I found some images, I think this is from Hong Kong, that, you know, a beautiful environment just improves human well-being, and there's a lot of studies that have shown that just green spaces in cities, when people can go to these places and spend some time in these places, that you know, they've measured various functions, health functions, and blood pressure is lowered, stress is lowered. These environments really do impact in a positive way human well-being. So how is infrastructure, how does it impact people's well-being? I've just listed some of the things. People's resilience and safety is impacted, their basic needs, and very importantly, their quality of life is impacted. Economic opportunities and stability. And of course, something that's extremely important, mobility and accessibility in the place that one resides and in the neighborhood that one lives in the city that one is a part of, and then environmental and social well-being. Now, examples of research on happiness are there are quite a few of these in the book, and I can't go over all of them. But I want to talk about this quality of life, which I referred to in the previous slide. There's a Greek term, eudaimonia. It's a term that Aristotle used to describe a life well lived, or the highest good humans could strive for. And eudaimonia goes beyond just feeling joy or contentment. It really encompasses a sense of purpose, meaning, and living a virtuous life. And eudaimonia is not a static state, but an ongoing process for striving for excellence and, as I said, living a meaningful life. Now, this is something that some scholars have taken and actually tried to operationalize what life would be like if there was this desire for striving for the highest human good. And I'll just highlight one such study. This is Carol Riff, RYFF, has written a chapter in our book that addresses eudaimonia. And here's her chart for the core dimensions of psychological well-being and their theoretical foundations. So the theoretical foundations are at the bottom of the chart. You see the different schools of psychology that are represented. And then this wheel, which is made up of the components of well-being, it kind of gives you a sense of what these researchers are getting at in relation to well-being and individual happiness. So environmental mastery, I'm just going to go around the wheel from top to the right. Positive relationships, autonomy, personal growth, self-acceptance, and purpose in life. So here's the psychological dimension of happiness and well-being and infrastructure. In other words, what Dr. Riff is saying is, you know, a good infrastructure in a city, in a neighborhood, in whatever setting, will further enhance these personal components of well-being as well. So what's the big picture? Countries and cities with well-developed infrastructure consistently rank higher in a happiness index that has been developed and has been tested over the years. And it's because people feel more secure in such cities. They feel more connected and are able to pursue fulfilling lives. I would suggest, for example, the city in recent years, we've been getting a lot of attention from a city in Spain, in particular, Barcelona, where they have tested various infrastructure techniques and developments, and they have actually made it safer. They have made it much more accessible. In the city, they've made places that are much more accessible to families, to children. And so, again, there are all kinds of methods out there for how you can improve infrastructure. And infrastructure is not just about roads and buildings. It's really about enabling human capacity and potential and creating a society where people can thrive. Again, there are many examples of this, not only in the book, but in other articles and books as well. Now, one thing that we are always interested in is the ethical or moral consideration for anything that the Bahá'í Chair explores. And in terms of infrastructure, the development of good infrastructure really plays a very crucial role in shaping human happiness. But it also raises this question about justice, fairness, sustainability, and social responsibility, which really fall under the more moral framework that should always be taken into consideration. So I've come now to my last slide. So what does this moral ethical consideration look like? Well, I've just listed a few: affordable housing and gentrification. Infrastructure should serve all individuals, not just the wealthy and the privileged. So this is something that's so important, in particular in the US, with marginalized populations always being sidelined in infrastructure projects. And I'm sure it's not just unique to the US. Climate responsibility, urban green spaces, infrastructure shouldn't destroy the environment for short economic gain. Ethical governance, transparency, and public good, that infrastructure should guard against corruption and misuse of funds through responsible governance, important of community involvement in decision-making, so that those who are in charge of these projects and those in government have some responsibility, and the citizens are involved in the decision-making. And then there's that very important area of technology and digital ethics. And of course, with AI now being very much on the scene, access versus privacy, low income and rural communities generally lack internet, leading to educational and economic disadvantages. So this digital divide is something that really concerns many countries, and infrastructure can be a great help in trying to eliminate the divide. Finally, surveillance and privacy concerns. Smart cities use data collection for efficiency, but excessive surveillance raises concerns about privacy, personal freedoms, and ethical AI use, and the need for data protection laws to prevent misuse of personal information becomes extremely important. So I have just given you a very, very brief overview of how this book that we published examines different facets of infrastructure and how important infrastructure is to everyone's well-being. And I end with these two images. I think, again, both are from Hong Kong, of beautiful green spaces for people to go and enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, dear Hoda. That was so compelling. And I know that there'll be some time following a few of these presentations for further discussion and engagement conversation about this. But it sparks many, many ideas. And I think it's a very fresh perspective on the value that we see of infrastructure. I think often we tend to kind of see it as an imposing type of development, which not always it reflects everyone's interest, but I think the vision that you've presented is a very fruitful one, and I think one that will help spark some very important discussion in terms of how we perceive the value of infrastructure and how to engage with it. You shared some photos of beautiful green spaces. That's in fact how Louisa and I met, was in one of these green spaces in Hong Kong, hiking, and that's how we initially made contact with one another. So I do appreciate that and the value of those relationships that you meet people, and you also improve your health in these contexts, and the value that the government has placed in preserving these spaces has been very important for all of us. Okay, so I'll just give a brief sharing as well. So this is what I'm going to share is part of a project which also began around 2021, 2022. This is also funded by the Hong Kong Government Research Council. It was a project called An Ounce of Prevention, Dispute Mitigation along the BRI. So it's looking at how we prevent and mitigate conflicts in the infrastructure context. What are some of the learnings that have that we've gained through this process? And so today I'll share a little bit about that, and this will be published later this year, in also in a book format. So just to give a background, what is community investor public facilitation or dispute mitigation? What does that mean? This can encompass a number of processes, whether they're formal or they're informal. But these are used by parties who are affected by infrastructure projects, so the effects of these projects and operations. And it could include pre-project consultation mechanisms, grievance mechanisms that exist alongside of a project where parties and individuals can share their input, their feedback, their concerns. It could also involve post-project mediation or facilitation, various studies, diligent studies to make sure that the project is continuing to conform to the policy of the host state. And so all of these things have really evolved over time. I think in the 1990s, there was a significant amount of learning. There were some difficult experiences in India, in the Narmada Valley. There was a hydroelectric dam project which caused quite a lot of social turmoil and upheaval. Individuals in the community were not happy with that project, and so there was a significant public backlash. And this was a project funded by the World Bank. And so the government of the US at that point, or the legislative body, the Congress, said, well, we're not happy about this. And this is part of the idea of development funding, is to build good relationships and positive impacts in communities. And if this is kind of the result of these investments, we need to pause on these investments until there's been a system is developed to engage more effectively with local communities. So they paused funding. They said, we won't fund further work with the World Bank until this issue is addressed. So subsequent to that, in the early 2000s, they developed the Office of the Compliance Advisor Ombuds, which was the first entity which was accessible to public citizens and large banking institutions to act as a channel of communication. Since that time, these institutions have evolved rapidly. They have grown in their scope, their reach, their network. They have engaged in joint learning processes among banks that fund projects throughout the world. So there's really been a significant amount of shared learning between these entities. And they are also, many of their guiding principles have been crystallized in various documents. One of these is the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And in this document, it expects companies to establish operational level mechanisms for individuals and communities to arrive at shared understanding and agreement about the resolution of community investor issues. Also, the OECD has a due diligence guideline, which has been very important. And that also calls for the development of prevention, mitigation, and of adverse impacts, and engage in decision-making with stakeholders regarding project impact. So these are principles and guidelines which many banks have adopted internally. These principles have informed the development of screening procedures at the outset of a project, and they have evolved and developed over time to become increasingly more robust. So part of the aim of this study was to see what has happened as these requirements have become increasingly more well-defined and more holistic in the way that they see the community and in the way that they see the importance of the ownership of the community in the infrastructure project. So a lot of that development, that increased kind of and heightened standards, you can sort of trace to around 2013 to 2019. So what this project did was look at cases, about 6 before that period and 6 after that period, to see what is the effect of increasingly robust diligence requirements for engagement with local communities. Is there a difference in the type of issues that may arise post-project? So it also involves survey work and also aggregate data that was accumulated from these banks, looking at their projects, total projects funded, and total grievances lodged before and after also this period of time. Okay, so the key takeaway is that, yes, you know, this question, and this is the name of the research project. Yes, the adage, there's an old saying that it is an ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure. Yes, it is actually in this context, but we still are in the process of learning how to facilitate effective preventative measures, how to facilitate effective consultation measures that are free from coercion or free from predetermined outcomes or predetermined objectives, so that truly reflect the views of individuals engaged in those processes. So here's the research finding. So the first one is about the aggregate number of claims that have arisen both before this period of heightened diligence requirement and after. And so for this particular part of the research, it found that after this 2010-2020 period, there you can see a drop in the percentage of grievances per project from about 15% to about 7% in 2021. There has been some slight resurgence of grievances, but overall, these findings tend to indicate that with more attention to community engagement, the number of total grievances has been shown to come down. Also, Accountability Council, this is another organization that looks at these issues. They found that before 2010-2020, this period, the single most cited cause of grievance was lack of consultation with communities. After that period, that was not the single most cited cause of the grievance. So we can see that there's been some progress made in terms of attention to this issue. The other aspect of the study was looking at the case studies, as I mentioned. I'll just touch on that briefly. So from the cases, what we can see is in those circumstances of increasingly heightened requirements for community engagements, this post-2013 period, as compared with the more ad hoc, discretionary, top-down forms of community engagement, we see that the number of stalled or canceled or litigated cases within the context of a project declines by 33% as compared to the more lax approach. The percentage of cases referred to local courts declined by 16%, and the number of cases pursuing party agreement through some sort of mediation or negotiation increased by 50%. So these findings really do encourage further investigation and support of how we can advance these consultation mechanisms in some way, how we can put further resource and time into their development, because they do tend to show that the overall project health improves the more time and effort we put into the consultative process. There is also some survey work. I won't go into all of that now, but if you have questions about this, unfortunately, I will need to excuse myself early. It's my daughter's graduation at this very moment. But if you have questions, you can email me. My email is sali@hku.hk. And I'd love to also hear your feedback about this study because it is undergoing further revisions. So any thoughts you have would be welcome. I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Louisa Tsang, who will share some of the work that she's been doing in the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. And she has a PowerPoint, so I will, and then she will be followed by David Palmer, who will take up the moderating role for this session, and he will help facilitate a question and answer period. So do think about any questions or comments you'd like to share for that last part. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone here. It's a privilege for me to be able to stand here to talk with you because my daughter, I imagine that she's sitting in one of these places more than 10 years ago. So she also graduated from LL.M many years ago. Talking about AIIB, I want to echo what Hoda just said about infrastructure. So talking about infrastructure, what AIIB does is we finance infrastructure for tomorrow. Excuse me, this doesn't work. Excuse me, does this work? Okay. Okay, now. Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. So who we are? Shahla just mentioned that we are the second largest multilateral development bank in the world. So what we do is we finance infrastructure. So it is for the wellness of the people of the nations that we financed. So to help them to become happier and hopefully with the infrastructure that they don't usually get to be able to build up, such as like railroad or power plant, like these things, and we will help. We can improve their life and make them happier. And I can share this PowerPoint with you all after this seminar, and maybe you can ask Shahla if you want to have the link to this PowerPoint. So in view of the time, I'm conscious about we need to finish soon, so I will just not go through each and every one of them. But if you have any questions, you can ask me or the panelist during the Q&A session. So the most important thing is why we do it. The last part is that we hope to have the goal is to develop the economies for the future, and with the assets, so they can have a better life and a better physical, digital, and social services, which hopefully will improve their overall economy and wellness. So our role and opportunity for infrastructure. So Hoda has mentioned quite a few, and I'm not going to repeat them here. So global membership. So AIB began the operations in 2016. And my office was set up about 3.5 years ago. I was there to help set up this office. So how does this infrastructure of the external infrastructure that helps us to have our inside wellness is the setting up of our ombuds office to help our colleagues to have a better wellness. So this is about the bank and about my office later. So this is the office of the ombudsperson. So have anyone heard of this term, ombudsman? Yeah? So excuse me, the lady here. Do you know where does this ombudsman, the term, originally come from? Very good. So I have a small gift for getting this right. Will you please pass it down there, please? Thank you. So the word ombudsman comes from Sweden, and the original meaning means representative. It means a representative of the government. If you have any problem with the government, they can go there to try to resolve the issues. But why is now changed to the ombudsperson? Very good. Yeah, men and women gender balance. So we now, instead of chairman, we say chairperson or simply chair. So we go along with the flow. So because in AIB, it is very important to have this gender balance and equality. So what is an ombudsperson? So it is the mission. I call my office, it's an ombuds office. So we have the acronym of OMB. I'm going to refer OMB as my office from now on. So our function is to facilitate informal resolutions. What kind of informal resolution is like, for example, I recently am handling a case involving two senior counsel in my bank. So they have some personal conflicts that escalates to a work level basis. It's like they don't see each eye to eye. So in team meetings, they're just snapping each other's head off, just not because of their ideas no good, because they don't like each other. So in this case, the personal conflict can evolve into workplace conflict that lead to the whole team have some kind of okay, you are my friend, so I will back you up. And the other party say that, okay, so during team meetings, so they will have a big problem arguing on some legal points. Of course, you are all lawyers in future. So you know that for legal points, you have different interpretations, even courts. The lower court can be ruled over by the upper court, higher court. So, and for legal advisors, if the two the lawyers from the same team haven't disagreement on their legal perspectives, that can cause problems. So their head, the department head, referred them to come to talk with me for some kind of informal resolution and see how we can help them. So what I did with them is I analyzed the situation. Okay, what are the root cause behind? Sometimes they won't tell you. You have to dig it through, and because what they say is just on the surface sounds very reasonable, but you know they have ulterior motive. That's what informal resolution comes into place. So, and what I do is, and also maybe I will identify if there is any trend. For example, because my workplace, there are over 70 countries, colleagues from all over the world. So they can have cultural difference, personality difference, with all sorts of conflicts you can imagine of. Some people, for maybe some nations, their inclination is to speak very loud. And some people, maybe they are very mellow. They feel, I'm very offended because they are very rude to me. So this kind of things, and when we have many people coming to my office complaining about one certain or several colleagues who consistently make them feel they have been intimidated. So our role is maybe we can try to do something about it. Maybe we can talk to the person being accused of the rude, being too rude to them, something like that. And then we can, if we find there is a consistent trend, like some departments or some department heads consistently being complained about not harassment or discrimination. So what else we can do apart from talking to the person? We arrange training. So actually, I have invited Shahla to come to our office to do a presentation on how to handle interpersonal conflicts in an international environment. So things like this. So we also have a respectful workplace advisor program, which is our fellow colleagues. We train them so that sometimes the colleagues they have problems. They talk to each other. So this RWAs will help their fellow colleagues to try to address their issues. And we encourage colleagues to speak up if they have any problems. And also we want to shape our culture into the AIIB way. AIIB is the short form for my bank. So Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So, sorry. So we have 4 ethical principles. So this is internationally practiced for Ombuds Office. So independence, impartiality, confidentiality, and informality. By independence, we mean that we are not reported to any department in the bank, including the president. Even the president asks us who has come to my office to report any cases. We will not tell them the names. We will just tell them the trend of the issues happened. And impartiality, like the case I mentioned with 2 lawyers, sometimes you have to put down your own biases. When you hear their stories, maybe you will draw your own conclusion about who is in the right or who is in the wrong. But when you put on the hat of an ombudsperson, you need to be very impartial. Put down all your judgment and biases. Even you have your own conclusion, but you cannot show them. You have to be very, very impartial or don't take any side. And confidentiality, as I just mentioned, even the president asked me to give the names, I cannot tell him, and he won't ask me anyway. So we can just tell, okay, there are 3 people from the bank, not even mention the department. Otherwise, they will know that which department head is being complained against. So we maintain strict confidentiality, and that's why we don't keep any record. We have our notes, but we will destroy them after we put in some kind of log to see how many cases came to us, but no names. And we are informal in the way that so they cannot think that okay, they have come to us, make a complaint, then the bank will automatically discipline other colleagues because we are informal. We do not take any action. So this is our do's and don'ts. So it is quite a long list, so I'm not going to go through it. I will give you a minute to read it about the main parts of the do's and don'ts, and I'm going to have a small quiz on this. Okay, done? Okay, can anyone tell me what does the Ombuds Office do? One of them, just one, no need, all of them. Cannot remember? Okay, yes. Okay. Yes, exactly. We don't provide legal advice. Very good. Okay, thank you. So, colleagues sometimes come to us and ask us, what can we do about certain cases? So this is what they expect when they come to my office. How can I help them? So I will explain our principles. Can you remember the 4 ethical principles that I just flashed up in the PowerPoint? Yes, very good. Independence, confidentiality, very good. Neutrality, good. Informality, very good. Okay, okay, you can have my last present. Thank you. So for this, for ethical principles, we'll explain to them upfront so they know what they expect. And we will listen. And it is very important for all of you who will become lawyers to listen with empathy, but not sympathy. Listen with empathy is very important. And we identify and clarify the issues and what do they want to get help from. What are their real issues behind? Sometimes what they tell you is not the real issue. you have to think through it. And as a lawyer, you have a very good training on this. And then we'll explore the options. So maybe they come to us to complain about another. So we tell them, okay, you can go through the formal channels, like you complain to the HR or to the ethics office for a formal investigation, things like that. And we can provide intervention. How do we intervene? Is that we guide them, we give them coaching, and how to manage the situation better. And also, sometimes with the permission, sometimes the colleagues will come to us, request us to do something on their behalf. For example, they don't like their department head. I want to request for a transfer, but I feel embarrassed to ask another department. So with their permission, they ask us to do this shuttle diplomacy for them. And we facilitate dialogue. So like these two colleagues I mentioned, when they fight with each other, we help them. We are there to help to like through a mediation, but an informal process to help them to come with an agreement, see if they can settle their dispute informally. And we also can refer them to the formal channels. For example, I have a lady came to me complain about sexual harassment, but she feels embarrassed to go to the ethics office to launch a formal complaint. So come to talk to me, and I was there to help her to at least address her emotions first, and then encourage her to report formally, because if she doesn't report it, that means the perpetrator can continue to remain in the bank and may cause further damages to the other colleagues or cause harm, or there will be other victims. So eventually this colleague, after speaking to us, was encouraged enough to report this colleague who had some kind of inappropriate behavior, like sending a text message to her like 3 a.m. in the morning saying, I love you, things like that. So this kind of harassment can be stopped. And also we provide training, just as we invited Shahla to do the coaching for us. And the most important thing is how, after one case has come to our attention, what do we do? If there are only one single case, we don't do anything. We don't report to the management. We just handle it just as the way I mentioned it before. But if we notice there is a trend of several cases all complaining about the same issue, it's a systemic issue, then we will report to the management. And also we will make recommendations on how to address these issues. So I'm conscious of the time, so that's the end of my presentation. And I welcome you to visit me in Beijing. I noticed some of you are from China. So if you are interested to visit Beijing, AIIB, I will give you a guided tour. Thank you.
So thank you very much to all of our three speakers. I'm David Palmer from the Sociology Department here at the University of Hong Kong. I'm an anthropologist, and I've actually been doing some research on the cultural or local community interactions around Chinese invested infrastructures in Belt and Road countries. And I've done some field research in places such as Laos, Pakistan, and Nepal, as well as other places, to look at some of the issues that actually Shahla in particular was talking about in terms of problems at the ground level when infrastructure projects face the realities of local communities and their needs and the difficulties of engaging in engagement with stakeholders at the local level. We had three very interesting presentations this morning, which were, it was very interesting how we move from really, first of all, thinking what is the ultimate goal of infrastructure building, which is extremely important, and it's actually not a topic that is often discussed. So that was extremely illuminating for me, Hoda's presentation. But then we went from the goals to the realities of building infrastructures that does involve communities that may not be happy with the way that it's going on. So how do we engage with local communities to prevent conflicts from arising? But even if we do that, conflicts will arise. And so we had the presentation on the ombuds person's office, which in your case, you were describing the internal process, but I think many of these principles would also apply in any conflict mitigation process, whether internal to a company or even in engaging with stakeholders. So I think this morning we really looked at all the different stages of infrastructure and conflict prevention. I'll just open this up for questions and discussion, but before I do that, I wanted to maybe just throw a few questions out. And I don't know if Hoda is still there. I know it's very, very late in Washington.
David,
Oh, yeah, you're still there.
yes.
Okay, so because I know it's very late over there, so yeah. So I think so I'll start off with a question for Hoda, um, and then for Louisa, right? And a question for Louisa, and I'll open it up for all the audience also to bring any comments or questions. And so. I think so. First of all, for Hoda, so there were actually a couple of I had a couple of thoughts. First of all, I think this is extremely important. People talk about infrastructures all the time um, without really thinking what they're actually for. Or when we think about what they're actually for, it's a very narrow kind of conception. So we just assume that that societies need infrastructure for their economic development, probably. So usually there's just the assumption that it's needed, but for what? We just don't really think about it. Or there's the assumption that it's bad. And so we just have a lot of polarized debates, which don't really get into the purpose of infrastructure. And so what I really liked about this approach is really seeing how does infrastructure, what is the integration between hard and soft infrastructure? So how can the construction of hard and soft infrastructure go hand in hand? How can the building of hard infrastructure contribute to the development of soft infrastructure? But even then, what is the purpose of soft infrastructure too? I'm an anthropologist, and we do, soft infrastructure is what we might call culture or society, and yet where do we want to advance the development of culture and society? So I think there was an important point that was made, which is that infrastructure is conducive, good infrastructure is conducive to happier societies. So now I want to bring up a few examples or questions that this this statement, some questions that come to my mind as I was thinking of some of my field research. Because I'm wondering how some of these ideas could be operationalized or even developed a little bit further. For example, what about the temporality? It seems that very often people, before an infrastructure is built, either they get extremely excited about what's going to be built, but then the reality might not live up to their expectations, or conversely, they might be very they don't like the idea of what's going to be built, but then once it's built, they're actually very happy about it. And so, for example, I was in Lahore in Pakistan last year, where there is a metro system was built by Chinese metro development company. And I spoke to many civil society representatives who had been involved in, there had been a lot of problems with some disruptions of local communities as the project was being built. And so many groups were organizing and they were concerned, and there was a lot of concern about local neighborhoods being destroyed and things like that. And so I spoke to these representatives and I learned about what the problems were. But when I arrived, actually the metro line was built. And wow, actually people were very happy about it, actually. So there was no, and people were just amazed because never had they been able to travel so conveniently from one end of the city to the other, and particularly women, for the first time, they could safely go out and go to another part of town without being molested or harassed. This is a very, very serious issue, and um, they could go out alone on the metro, they could travel, and the way, just the type of behavior that kind of is the norm on the metro line is different from what's the norm on the street or in puts or other types of available public transportation. So there was actually a radical change in many people's lives that the people I spoke to actually considered to be positive. So there were issues. So after it was built, so if we were to think before or during the construction, then it looked like this project was actually damaging the happiness of the communities, and people were raising a lot of concerns that of negative impacts of the project. But they couldn't predict, or they couldn't imagine that after the project, actually, oh, there were a lot of things they had never imagined before that maybe outweighed the issues. So this is one thing. So there's a kind of a temporality, because in the short term, people may feel that they might feel that their happiness is going to be affected, but in the long term, it could be the opposite. But then it goes the other way around too. Then the other major infrastructure program in Pakistan is called the CPAC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. And actually, when this was launched, everybody in the whole country was unbelievably excited. They said it's a game changer. The whole country, it's going to be so great for the whole country and everything like that. But now that various things have happened, actually, most people are not really people are not really seeing a lot of tangible benefits from all of these investments. So we have very different perceptions based on the short-term or long-term temporality. So how can we factor that into this eudaimonia, like the building of the integration of infrastructure building into the construction of a materially and spiritually progressive and happy society? So that's my first question. And my second one is also going back to the community issue. And it's one that I'm really grappling with because having gone to various places with infrastructure projects, and in any project, especially if we're a major infrastructure, let's say a highway, railway, a hydroelectric dam, or so on, communities will be impacted. People will be displaced. So livelihoods will be affected. Communities will be uprooted. There will be environmental impacts. And so there will always be inevitably some kinds of conflicts, which may be mitigated by better consultative methods and so on and so forth. But then an argument that I've heard being made is that, and it's a bit similar maybe to the issue of Lahore, is that a small number of people might be affected. But let's say if you're going to bring electricity to a whole country, so a country that has almost very low electricity, so the infrastructure is in very bad shape, and if you build a large hydro dam that will displace 10,000 people and will have some environmental impact, but then the result is the entire country will have enough electricity, and that will transform things for the whole country. And then I've heard this argument said that, speaking from experience, once they've received the electricity, everybody's going to be very happy. But a small number have had to sacrifice. So what's the trade-off between the sacrifice, which may be involuntary, of the small number of people who are directly affected by the construction, and the overall the overall population. So how do we work that out? Yeah. So I don't. These are big questions, but you know, should one small community block the prosperity of a larger population? Yeah. So that's my question. Two of my questions for Hoda. And for Louisa. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, right, the principles that you've applied or that you've described for the ombudsperson's office within the company, to what extent, I guess would be speaking about other branch of the AIIB, but to what extent would similar approaches be used in community engagement, let's say for the bank, as it is dealing with some of these local community issues in its investments? If you have anything to say to that, to what extent would these principles be generally applicable? That would be my question. But those are my questions. But maybe before you, how about if I let the two of you answer these questions first, and then we can open it up to the whole audience. Yeah. So Hoda, do you have anything to say? Yeah.
David, those are really great questions. On the first one about spirituality and happiness and well-being, the eudaimonia, I think your question was, how do we achieve that? Or what are the best ways to move in that direction?
So my question was on the perception of short-term or long-term. People may they may the connection to to whether an infrastructure is conducive to happiness may be very different if we have a short-term perspective or a long-term perspective.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So I think from what I gleaned in relation to the chapters that were presented in the book that we edited, it seems that the best infrastructure projects are the ones that first and foremost take into consideration the soft infrastructure, meaning relational issues, meeting with the local community, talking to the local community, getting their ideas, getting their perspectives. And even when it seems like, and I loved your example of was it the subway or the metro or whatever in Pakistan, and the safety of the women, how it changed, it really changed a major cultural barrier. So by engaging the local community, by bringing them along, by explaining things very carefully to them. And I'll give you an example. We had a speaker from Medellin, Colombia, an architect who talked about a project that they were involved with, and the mayor was very much in favor of. And they went to the poorest neighborhood to set up this project, which I can't explain it all in detail, but it was to develop to build a school that would serve the community, an elementary school, and also a library. And the way they engaged the local community was just profound. And to this day, that whole project is going very well. And again, that relational, that soft aspect of infrastructure combined with the hard is managing quite well. So I would say the best examples that come to mind are where you do involve the local community. And even when there is resistance, which there's, my sense is there's always going to be resistance to change by somebody. But it's how those discussions are carried out, how time is given to making sure that people are expressing their views and all of that. But then in the end, if all the hard and soft infrastructure principles that were presented about projects at the beginning are upheld, then I think those who are going to carry out the infrastructure, the construction of it, will have to try it out and see what happens, as happened in your example of Pakistan. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but I think it's the notion of involving the grassroots community in what is about to be thrust upon them. You know, that I think has proven very important. And another factor has to do, which I didn't have time to go into, but it also maybe touches on your second point. Displacement and those major difficulties. If people, and there's studies, by the way, that have come up with conclusions about this. If people on the ground perceive corruption on the part of those who are carrying out infrastructure projects, and if there is indeed corruption, then definitely the project will be doomed, because there just isn't any kind of collaboration, cooperation, or people feeling happy that this change is going to take place within their environment. But there's clear indication that well-being, infrastructure well-being, ties very much to an environment where corruption does not exist. So again, there are many projects that have been taking place that can happen around the world where indeed corruption has destroyed any form of happiness for the local community, and for the very reasons that you mentioned, for the displacements and all that. But that's an obvious example. Where there is this example, like the dam that you mentioned, where it's a huge, huge project, I think in some of those cases, in areas of the world where we have had dams created, and there have been decades now that have passed, we have seen if I can call it a tragedy of those projects, that at first people thought, oh, this is a great idea and let's do it. But over time, you displaced populations, you ruined cultures, you did things that were really not very helpful, in fact, very harmful. And then in the end, you find out that the dam was really not the most helpful thing, and that indeed it destroyed far more than it helped create in terms of infrastructure and happiness. So that is a tough one, because the tendency is to just say, this is the quickest, the best option, let's go with it. Whereas the best infrastructure projects, I want to say they're interdisciplinary in nature, meaning they bring in the diversity of all the expertise that you need. Someone who understands the environment, someone who understands, of course, the architecture, the engineering, et cetera, but also someone who understands whether this grand project and what damage it may cause to a population is, over the decades to come, something that will be long-lasting and really helpful or not. I mean, those are really difficult questions, but I do think we have enough knowledge to be able to answer them if we really give it the time and attention that it requires. both for the local population and for those who are trying to bring in the hard infrastructure. I don't know if I did justice to your questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Hoda. So, Louise, yeah.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Hoda, for your excellent answers. And I just want to also echo what you mentioned about corruption, because before I joined the AIIB, I was the Chief Corruption Prevention Officer of the Independent Commission Against Hong Kong ICAC, before I joined the bank. So anti-corruption and the corruption prevention is one of my main areas of working experience. So maybe we can talk more about this if you're interested to know this area. And welcome to ask me maybe after this seminar that if you are also interested in these questions. So I want to address David's question about how do we apply the principles of ombudsman to the community. Actually, there are several main types of ombudsman in the world. Many, for my job, is we call organizational ombuds. We serve mainly our own organization. In North America, I think most universities, if not all, have their ombudsman within the university to address the staff and students' issues. And there is another type of, we call it classical ombudsman. Has anyone heard about the Office of Ombudsman in Hong Kong? Yes. And there is an ordinance of this ombudsman ordinance in Hong Kong. Lawyers, please take a look at it if you haven't heard of this ordinance in Hong Kong. So this ordinance in Hong Kong is to protect the citizens' right in Hong Kong if they find any government departments or any maladministration in the public service. So the Hong Kong Office of the Ombudsman is just like a watchdog of the Hong Kong government to ensure the any issues has been properly addressed within the administration. And there is another type called healthcare ombudsman. So a lot of times patients are very fragile or they don't have the mental or physical capacity to defend themselves or to help themselves if they have any issues. So the healthcare ombudsman will speak on their behalf to help them. And there is one more, is the main type is like a consumer ombudsman. Like in the UK, they have ombudsman for the banking or for the insurance. So any customers, if they have any problems relating to that particular field or any trade, they can report to their respective ombudsmans. There are some more new ombudsman fields such as childcare and media. And also they are working mainly on those areas to address issues and problems about their particular field. Have I answered your questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have
David,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. May I just say one other thing? I'll be
Please.
very quick.
Yeah.
I don't, but you know, I was just thinking where I live in Washington, D.C., there's a lot of gentrification taking place. And, you know, D.C. is a very interesting place because you have, you know, you have neighborhoods that are really lower socioeconomic status. And there have been wonderful developers, companies, who have actually done a beautiful job, as far as I can tell, and I've tried to follow and read and talk to some of the leadership. They have done a beautiful job of ensuring that people are not displaced or to find ways to provide housing for people that might be displaced after, you know, talking with the neighborhood and all of that. And also the issue of not that the company isn't so greedy that then it really takes advantage of a population that has no power in a situation like that. In other words, speaking about the spiritual or the moral framework, I think the ethical aspect of this infrastructure is such an important one. And there are companies, there are entities, there are governments, there are institutions that really do take into consideration this notion of let's not be greedy about this. And of course, corruption would also be an aspect of this. And let's see how we can accommodate the needs of people who really are quite vulnerable in these cases. So I just wanted to say we can find models that are more ethical in these cases.
Thank you, Hoda. So we have about a little more than 5 minutes for any questions or comments from the audience. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the presentations. I thoroughly learned a lot from it. I basically want to share infrastructure and being a lawyer. Many years ago, when I became a lawyer, I was acting for an activist in Malaysia. And he's the kind of, tie yourself around the tropical tree and said, don't chop this down, because they were building this huge Bakun Dam in Sarawak State. Huge dam where, of course, big infrastructure thing, that was going to inundate, lots of forest. And the indigenous people who lived there, they were not consulted, right? And so the government decided that it was going to chop this hardwoods. So I went there to act for this guy who was arrested, okay? But we found out that there was all these indigenous people who were being relocated, the ethical part of. So they were taken out from the jungle, right? Look, they are hunters, right? They use blowpipes to, shoot monkeys and all that. And it's really hard for indigenous people to get used to living in a city. Okay, so the compensation was giving them money. So the government decided it was going to give money to all these people. They had houses, so they were given money. And so the men were given money, okay? The women were not in the discussions. So they got the money and they went and bought cars because they watched TV and, they bought cars. They didn't know that you have to buy petrol, So there are all these cars sitting in front of the house, but they don't know about money and, how to spend it. And that they needed to buy petrol and that sort of thing. So it's the thing about displacing indigenous communities when they are not sort of geared towards modern living. I mean, there's no right or wrong, but ethically, like gentrification, you see, that sort of thing. Is it in the long run better for the kids? I don't know. I mean, it's always been a question I used to, worry about and think about. When I came to Hong Kong, I was a prosecutor in the Department of Justice, and ICAC was my client. So I prosecuted corruption for 9 years, right? So very good. ICAC, the department, especially the department that deals with prevention, a lot of education. I mean, I was not doing the education part. I was actually going to court, put people in jail, that sort of stuff. Corruption is insidious. I mean, when I first came to Hong Kong, I see it just sort of got off the ground. So Hong Kong people are the young ones, very lucky. The whole generation, you haven't seen corruption, right? But the Hong Kong I arrived in was very corrupt. Yeah, like the firemen would come to a burning house, and if you don't give money, they won't turn on the water. So you see your house being burned down, that sort of thing. So well done. I mean, I see it's very good, and it's amazing that Louisa, you've gone on to to AIB and do this work with ombudsman, which of course is very good too. So the ombudsman system, I think, is very helpful because it's at the infrastructure level. We want to deal with all sorts of conflicts, and that's very interesting. I drafted the mediation ordinance for Hong Kong. And after that, the government, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority and the Securities Futures Commission asked me to set up the financial ombudsman system. So I went to UK and went to Scandinavia, Denmark, Sweden, all that, and did the work. What sort of systems do they have? It's about finding the right infrastructure for something that you need to deal with a problem. Because remember, there were protests in the streets with Lehman Brothers mini bonds, right? So one of the things the government of Hong Kong wanted to do was to make sure that there will be accessibility, processes where it's a lot cheaper than going to courts, because courts in Hong Kong are really expensive. So that's why the need to have a financial dispute resolution system. So in the end, with all the models in front of the government, they decided not to follow the ombudsman in Hong Kong, which is the one looking in civil service watchdog, right? The idea was to have something cheap and cheerful, okay, not a government institution. And therefore, I had to start the financial dispute resolution system for Hong Kong using mediation and arbitration to resolve financial disputes. So all in all, I think it's useful for us to look for, good ways where we bring benefits. So very interesting, your work in Lahore, right? And how, the metro system has helped women, which, I mean, my Lahore friends think it's so amazingly good. It's clean, it's efficient, and they save money, right? So it's something that they accepted. So I think it's the need to think about community wellness, community engagement is crucial. But wonderful. Thank you very much, all of you. It's a wonderful morning. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I think our time is up. Yeah. So unless there's one last very, very short question from anybody. Well, I would like to thank Hoda and Louise, and thank our, what is your name again? Su Chem. Yeah, thanks, Su Chem, for that, also for that sharing, and thank all of you here. And I think this was a very interesting morning that brought, actually, right, as I was saying, the whole range of angles that's important in investment. So let's end it today.
David.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, David, for moderating for us. And thank you to the class. It's a pleasure to have been able to join you. Goodbye.